we can take care of the land and take care of our horses at the same time. The sacrifice area. So the system that we have set up is very much a rotational grazing program for our horses. And of course, a lot of cattle producers will use this. A lot of your grass-fed farmers, whether they're running sheep, goats, even hogs or cattle, will utilize this method. But when it comes to horses in particular, rather than letting our entire pasture become a sacrifice area in that springtime, whether you're going through a thaw and you're up into the frozen country and things are thawing out, or maybe you're in this springtime where we're fortunately very blessed to be getting some rain, but the grass is not super vibrant yet, so the water is just merely getting soaked into the ground and all the extra is running off and it becomes a muddy mess. We don't want our fields to become an absolute mud hole, right? We want to be able to take care of our ground so that our horses actually have grass to graze on. So by creating this rotational grazing program for our horses where they have access to half-acre lots, what we're actually able to do is allow the grass to grow and give them grass to graze on while also taking care of this, because this is going to help our horses' health tremendously and it's going to help the health of our land tremendously, which is really important for, you know, not just us and the performance of our horses and the health of our horses, but also, you know, if you ever go to resell a property, you always hate to go look at a property where you can tell people just used it. They just wrecked it. They just reaped the land and raped the land for what it was. And they just are like, oh, this is just the way it is. Like, versus actually using a little bit of a different thought process particularly when it comes to the horse industry, because oftentimes, guys, we are so far behind the 8 ball when it comes to being on the cutting edge of like, hey, we can change the way we've done things before, so that way we can take care of the land and take care of our horses at the same time. So let's get into this. Let's show you around. Let's show you exactly how we got this set up. And I'm really glad you're here. Be sure you hit that subscribe button, like and follow, guys. Can't wait to see you on more videos, but hope this helps you with your horses. And if you're trying to get more horses, maybe this will give you a way to convince your significant other to allow you to get more horses. So as we get down here and show you guys around, I want you to know that this is a super, super, super simple system. We have merely hooked it in to an electrical box and used one strand of electric wire. We got some very affordable fiberglass posts that are easy to put in the ground, that are easy to move, they're lightweight. And guys, for us, we are super busy people. We don't need necessarily more chores. I'm willing to work a little bit harder to make sure that my horses have the best care possible, but it has to be something super simple. So if I'm traveling, I can trust that my wife can do it, or I can trust that somebody working for us can do this, and it doesn't take away a lot of time and effort from their schedule, right? It has to be super scalable. As we say, simple scales, fancy fails. And when we have a simple system, particularly when it comes to our horse management, then we can scale that. It can become, you can reproduce that, which means y'all can do this at home too. When we have horses that go back to the same paddocks, to the same pastures, then we end up with a lot of parasite issues, and oftentimes now we're talking about having to rotate wormers, and our parasites becoming resistant to those wormers, and that's a big, big, big problem when it comes down to horse health, right? So I'm going to flip the camera around. We got some horses coming up here, and it'll give you a bit of an idea of how this system works, and then I'll start to introduce to you each piece of the puzzle. So what we have here is what we refer to as the sacrifice area. And so rather than letting our entire field, multiple acres, 7 to 10 acres, become the sacrifice area because the horses are grazing the same patch of grass, then we give them a designated sacrifice area. And that's where we're at. And here in the sacrifice area, well, behind Ella here is their water trough, and they have a run-in shelter. So this is my wife's horse, Ella. So in this sacrifice area, this is a permanent place for them to come get their water and to get out of the weather and be able to get in the run-in shelter when they decide to use it, right? And in this area, come here. Got my little corgi out here, and there's a guard donkey that belonged to the next door cattle guys, and I don't want her in there with him. So you can see here where this buckskin gelding's sitting. He's coming up this alleyway in between this permanent fence, and then we have a temporary fence run on the inside, which you'll be able to get a better look at here in a second. And this alleyway is going to be a bit of a sacrifice area. We're going to run that alleyway around the perimeter of the property and then let the middle of it be where they would have access to the pasture. So we'll take you down there to get a better look at it. But this alleyway is what they'll utilize to come back up to their water trough and be able to get in shelter, get water, and ultimately it's going to be really, really good because their grazing is out in the fields and their water source is in a permanent location, which means we don't have to worry about bringing water to them when we rotate their fields, rotate their paddocks, and it keeps them moving. Rather than putting their hay and their water right next to each other, we have the water in one location, we have the hay in another location, and they actually have to move a fair bit of distance, which is great for their overall health and keeping these horses moving out and around. So here you can see we got the exterior fence that shares the property line with our neighbors, and then on the inside we've just used some very simple fiberglass posts and electric wire on the inside to make sure that we can kind of keep the horses where we want them, and this alleyway is going to take them right down to their new paddock. So here's a pretty cool view. Right here is our corner where their new paddock is here. I'm going to show that just to you in a second, but you can see right up this where it looks pretty beat down. And about 2 days ago, we got hammered with rain, and we probably had at least a solid 2 inches of rain. And so this particular paddock, this section east of this fence line, just above this fence line, is where they were for the last couple of days. And you can see how they have really, what we would consider, disturbed the ground, okay? And that's a really good thing because within the ground, there's a seed bank, right? There's all these seeds, and oftentimes if that ground does not get disrupted, think back to the time when buffalo came across the ground, that disturbance was really, really, really important for reinvigorating the seeds in the ground so that when spring came, then those seeds could come up. But a lot of times in traditional horse management, we don't have that type of disturbance, or we have the disturbance, but we don't actually have the rest that the ground really requires for those seeds to have a chance. So at this point, it is the beginning of February, and when I was explaining this to my wife, this is not so much about giving our horses grass to eat, because the grass is just now trying to come up, all right? This is way more at this point in the season. This is way more about keeping them off the extra acreage. That way the grass actually has a chance to come up, and then we can give this spot rest. And by the time, I'm gonna explain to you how we have this all set up, but basically this section right here should have at least between 4 and 6 weeks of rest before the horses ever come back to this spot. So all of this ground will have 4 to 6 weeks of sunshine, probably hopefully a little bit more rain to be able to rest, which will help with the parasites, which will help with the grass growth. And in 4 to 6 weeks, we should have some really good looking grass in this paddock for them to actually come back and graze. Versus if we let them have access to all this, these 7 horses would graze basically the 7 to 8 acres they would have access to so fast that they wouldn't even have a chance, the grass wouldn't even have a chance to get mature. So you can see how this, where they beat this up, and then we put this fence line in, and over here is their new paddocks. So now we're at the bottom corner of their new paddock, and we just gave them access to this new paddock yesterday. And y'all can see, like, there's some grass in here, right? There's some coverage. It's way more dry than the muddy mess that they made up in the top one. And you can see that we have 2 troughs out here, and then we have several other piles where we are still feeding hay, right? We're definitely making sure that they're getting enough roughage. But as I mentioned, this is way more about keeping them on smaller acreage and not giving them access to the rest, so that the rest of the ground has the chance to actually come up. And so this spot right here is a 1/2 acre. Okay, so we're giving them 1/2 acre lots. And what we're gonna do is, after they've stayed here, we'll watch the ground. We'll basically give them somewhere between 3 and 5 days on this piece of ground. And once we start to look at, like, okay, the ground's we want it to get disturbed enough to where we're like, hey, if they stay on here any bit longer, it's going to be detrimental, right? It's not going to be healthy for the ground. So we want some disturbance is good, right? Too much disturbance will destroy things. So we'll watch this, and what we kind of gauge is that when they're grazing, they'll probably be on there 3 to 5 days. And then we'll move this fence, and their alleyway will come down to this fence line. So their alleyway will continue about another 200 and some feet. And then this section down here, they'll get another 1/2 acre. All right, so we have about 7 acres back here, and we chop that up into 14 lots, and we give them somewhere, say an average of 4 days over 14 lots. That's gonna be, what, 56 days. I think if I did that math correctly, 56 days, almost 2 months before they would ever come back to one spot. And then when they come back, the ground's gonna have a chance to actually get that forage in there. We're gonna be able to reduce the parasite load. We're gonna be able to grow grass for our horses to actually enjoy. And some of y'all might have heard of the Freedom paddocks or the Paradise paddocks, or there's one called like Freedom something, and they're track systems, right? And that's basically what we're doing here in a very similar format, but we're using the idea of a track system, which we're going to be building our track, which is our alleyway around this, as we move their fields. As we move their little paddocks down, they'll be getting their track. And the idea of the track is that it keeps the horses moving so that you can put hay in certain locations. And for right now, because their track is only probably about 250 feet up into the sacrifice area, eventually we'll probably run this entire perimeter of this 7 acres with a track, and then they'll have access to a 1/2 acre of grass, and then they'll have to travel further and further, because on the other side of the farm we actually have a run-in shed, and once the track eventually gets that far, they'll have access to that run-in shed, and they'll have access to this run-in shed. So that's just a really quick rundown of exactly how we're managing this with our horses. Alright, so if you found this video helpful, or if you would like to see more like it, you have questions, then please hit that like button, drop your comments, drop your questions down below, let us know what you thought. Meredith and I had a very extensive discussion. We're going to be bringing you guys plenty more videos showing you basically behind the scenes exactly how we are doing things here at our property. So guys, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.